So yes, my name is Magda and I am currently a student in London School of Economics and Political Science. I will talk about the division of labor in Polish households, but less so from the quantitative point of view, and more about how the couples themselves perceive the division of labor, and most importantly, how they make the decisions. So the plan for presentation is basically first to talk about my PhD research and the data set that I'm using. And then I make a very short introduction to the Polish context. Afterwards, I talk about the division of labor, prior children and after children. And in the division of labor after children, I particularly talk about the uptake of leaves connected with childcare. And then I will talk about why the dual and female double burden family model is, I believe, persistent in Poland. And as a kind of summary of the whole presentation, I will talk about the decision making, and I will ask the question when couples really negotiate their division of labor. Okay, so my research is based mainly on semi-structured deep interviews conducted in Poland in 2019, which means that they were conducted before the pandemic. And by semi-structure, I mean that I had the list of questions, but I used it mainly to check that all topics I wanted were covered in the discussion, but I was trying to make the connection with my respondents and make it as close to normal conversation as possible. So my PhD research is focused on division of labor between partners and the change in division of labor after a birth of a child. And I interview heterosexual couples in the contemporary Poland. I conducted 86 individual interviews with 44 couples, which means that only 2 of respondents, 1 man and 1 woman, decided to not participate in the study after their partner already participated in it. And then almost all of the couples interviewed had at least 1 child aged 0 to 6 years old at the time of the interview, with the exception of few couples from villages and small towns, because it was much more difficult to gather respondents from such locations, and therefore I agreed also for couples who had older children. And in the end, I got a pretty diverse sample with different socioeconomic characteristics of the couples. However, it is important to say that it is skewed towards the direction of more educated people. And also, most of my respondents worked full-time. Both of them worked full-time pure having children. And I don't think it needs to be like the proper, it doesn't have to be that I managed to talk to all types of couples. Also, during the presentation, I used some quantitative data, and I want to underline here that they are all secondary data from other sources, and I have not conducted myself any survey, or I did not quantify my interviews in any way. Okay, so here is one important disclaimer. I would actually use many of quotes from the interviews, and I have not yet published or presented my PhD thesis, so please don't use them if possible. And all comments and criticism are welcome, but I would like to have discussion at the end of my presentation. However, if something is not clear on the slides, feel free to interrupt me and ask questions. Okay, so about the Polish context. So Poland is a post-socialist country with a long history of full-time employment of women. And even now, the part-time employment is still an exception for both men and women. And here on the slide, we actually see the part-time employment in European countries, and Poland is much below the European Union average. And specifically for women, the women working part-time is 9.5% of the whole population in comparison to 31% in the whole European Union. So yes, in Poland, there are much less part-time workers for various reasons. At the same time, 77% of Poles say that the most important role of a woman is to take care of her home and family. And perhaps in this context, it is not so strange that my respondents say that women most likely, like in most of the couples, take the responsibility for housework, even prior having children. And here I give voice to my respondents. First, a male one, who says, okay, division of labor, yeah? No, I would not say that anything changed with birth of a child. I did not like some cleaning, etc., because it is so monotonous, and dishwashing was even disgusting. This was always done by my wife, and I like to cook, so from the very beginning, I was the one cooking. And then about the situation during parental leave, he says, yes, indeed, when she was at home, at that time, she took care about dust and such things. She was doing such things because she could, so I didn't have to. And then from other couple, a woman says, cleaning. I always try to make it so that we share cleaning, but it would not say that it is a fair sharing. I do more, surely, but it is also not that my partner does nothing. He tries to help. Usually I have to coordinate it. I must remind that something needs to be done, because if I don't remind, it means that it is not needed, even when you can write on a dust. So by presenting the quotes, I don't want only to say that women do most of the housework, especially those boring, routine, everyday tasks, which we all know. But I also want to draw attention to how men and women are talking about this. So it actually happens that both of them are talking about things they do not like to do, but for men it is it usually means that they are talking about it to say what they like and why they do the particular tasks, while women are mentioning it when there is one particular task they don't want to do, and therefore their partner takes over. It often happened in the interviews I conducted that men were not able to say what exactly the housework was about, and they used similar words as the respondent here, like such things. And it was very hard to dig into what actually is done in the household. And women often used phrases like tries or helps, And there was often a talk about the additional work of organizing the housework. So it was clear that a woman takes over the responsibility for it, even if she is not the only person doing it. And then what I found particularly important to show is that the division of housework was established in certain pre-existing circumstances. So it was not like a choice which was done without some pre-existing conditions. And here mainly I'm talking about the skills required to do housework, and that men more often did not came with them from their original households. So I will maybe only use the second quote, where the female participant tries to teach her husband to participate more in housework. And she says, when I met him, he called his grandmother when there were no sandwiches at home. His shirt and socks, which he dropped on the floor, magically reappeared 2 days later, washed and ironed in his wardrobe. He lived in a house with mother, sister, and grandmother. So when I took over, he at first behaved as he was 3 years old, and I taught him to make sandwiches. At first, we made them together. Then I asked him to do them by himself. Later, I suggested that on Sunday, I would like to get my breakfast to bed from time to time. So with small steps and being systematic to show him and teach him. And 7 years later, he learned to prepare instant spaghetti. So generally, I am doing the cooking. And yes, this quote is like an outlier with a man like particularly unable to do housework. However, it was persistent in the interviews, and it was obvious that men joined the new household with less ability to do housework, and that impacted things. And if women wanted them to participate more, they had to do the additional labor. And there was an important question if they did that before having a child. And it was important because after having a child, the amount of labor was so big that it was actually hard to engage into negotiations then. Okay, the slide does not want to change. So we have this situation prior children, and then the child is coming, and it becomes very important what the Polish state has to offer. And actually it offers, I would say, good support, and it is a seemingly gender neutral policies with long parental leaves available to both parents. For paid childcare leaves, we have 20 weeks of maternity leave, and 14 weeks only has to be taken by a woman. Then there is 2 weeks of father's leave, only for men, and 32 weeks of parental leave, which can be shared. And it could be taken also only by a father. So currently effective leave in Poland is rather high, and most of it is available to both parents. Additionally, we have monthly support for children, 500 plus, and there is up to 36 months of unpaid childcare leave for employees, both men and women. And then there is some money paid with this leave to the poorest couples, which could impact the less affluent couples in some way. But with all this gender-neutral support of Polish state, the uptake of parental leave in Poland is very, very strongly gendered. By that, I mean that only 1% of all parents taking the parental leave in 2019 were fathers. And this is not even taking into account how long the leave was. It's just if they took any of it. And then it becomes evident that typically, even among couples with high socioeconomic status, who theoretically could have more gender equal values, women take all available leave. So together with maternity leave, it is 1 year of leave. And then what is very interesting is that almost all of my respondents were knew that the leave can be shared and the father can take it, but they very rarely discussed it. So the first quote here is that there was no discussion that I stay at home and he stays at work. He was at such moment in his working life on the full-time employment contract that he could take 2 weeks of father's leave, so he took it. It was obvious for us that I will stay at home, wasn't it? And then the second quote is, it was obvious. We know each other's salaries, and due to financial issues, it was clear that I am taking the leave. Anyway, it was natural for both of us that first months I would be the one looking after the child. I'm just breastfeeding, right? It was so natural. It was so natural that it was out. It was me. That it was out of the question, and that I will take the leave. So basically, most couples did not discuss it, even the possibility of sharing the leave. And when I asked this question during the interview, they were actually surprised by it in some way. And later in the presentation, I will talk about couples who actually shared the parental leave and how it came to be. But even I was actively trying to recruit such people, and still I have only 5 couples who shared the leave. So we have the situation when only 1% of fathers decide to take any portion of the parental leave. And then after 1 year, there is an important question of the provision of institutional childcare in Poland. And basically it is very low, especially for children younger than 3 years old. Here we can see the statistics for the European Union countries, and Poland is way below the European Union average, with only 11.6% of children in the nurseries. And one of my female respondents says that this time from 1 to 3 years old is just a gap. You don't know what to do with the child to make you feel safe. And there are basically 2 main things that happen. So either a woman stays at home and takes the unpaid childcare leave, or she is able to secure another carer, and it is most often one of the grandmothers, and less likely, and only for more affluent couples, a nanny. And this results in a further differentiation of roles of mother and father, also on the labor market. And the obvious thing is with when a woman decides to take the unpaid childcare leave, And my respondent said that she decided to take 1 year of it. And then she says that my husband could take it, but after recalculating our income and expenses, it would make no sense, unfortunately. He earns much more than me because during these 2 years, when I was pregnant and gave birth to child, he got promotion 2 times. And then she says that there was a moment 3 years ago that I earned more than my husband. So basically the gap created by birth and taking care of the child changed the situation with earnings between a couple and make men stronger in this struggle. And even for women who all the time remained in full-time employment, meaning they did not take any unpaid leave, they often say that their career situation changed dramatically. And here is one I would say is still a successful, has a successful career, but she does not feel like it. She says, I work 15 years in the same company. I do not make a career. Everything I have achieved, I've done it before children. After them, I achieved nothing. I'm stuck in the same place. Although I think my enthusiasm for promotion has passed and I have accepted that I can only expect tit for a tat. No. And then she also talks about her husband, and she says that he changed jobs and he was also promoted and he advances professionally after children. So the lives of women change even if they remain in full-time employment, and many of them do in Poland. And often for them it is a choice between no employment or full-time employment because of the realities of the labor market in Poland. As we said previously, the part-time work is not so common. So we land in a situation when there is a significant gender employment gap among young people with young children. So by young children, I mean those who are aged 0 to 6 years old. And the line below is showing a gender gap for people without children, and the one in dark blue above it is the gender gap for people with children. And we can see that those lines are very strikingly apart. And in a way, we can say that the gender equality for children is pretty high in Poland, and we, at least in this one factor, and women tend to work full-time prior to having children, and the situation dramatically changes when they have young children. And it is important to mention that for this graph, I used actually only men and women 20 to 49 years old, so those who could have young children. And basically, I compare apples to apples as much as possible. This outline is only an outline, but this is how I would say that the division of labor in Poland around children is created. So basically, we start with both partners working full-time or studying full-time. And then there is the first child is born, and the lives of men don't really change, and father works full-time. I mean, they change in some important aspects, but they don't change as much as women and the lives of women. And here is a quote which shows that from a female respondent. Certainly, there was also a moment when I felt so angry that there was a 100% change in my life, in my life, while my husband's life changed about 10%. This is how it looks like in the real world, right? So basically, afterwards, the mother naturally takes both maternity and parental leaves, 1 year of them. And by the way, it is often just talked by my respondents as maternity leave or parental leave as a whole. So they don't really differentiate between the maternity leave and parental leave. For them, it is only a yearly leave for a child. And then they take also some holidays, which they usually accumulated for this purpose. And this is all done because afterwards it is hard to decide what will happen with a child and how to get childcare for them. And therefore, it is either mother staying at home or the grandmother, most likely as other daily carer. Sometimes it is a nanny or another person from a family. Very rarely, at least among my couples, a grandfather alone, although grandfathers tend to have grandmothers, definitely. And then there is an option of a nursery. And if this child care is secure, then a mother comes back to work. It almost does not happen that mother comes back to work and the father takes care of a child. But among my respondents, there was one case like that. And it was, there were some additional reasons for it. So the father did not have a stable employment and he was much less, he had lesser income basically than the mother of a child. So it is exceptional situation. And then with the preschool, it is much more available, but still mothers tend to be responsible for childcare, even if fathers are becoming more active. And even when mothers come back to full-time employment, and even for couples who used to earn more or less the same money, it now becomes more often that fathers earn more because of the difference in promotions and so on. So with all these choices made by individual couples in the specific context, we have the situation when the dual earner, female double burden model is persistent in Poland. So basically, it is kind of expected that a woman would earn money and support the household financially. And it is also considered kind of her right to come back to employment after the children are more than 3 years old. There is no more pressure for her to stay at home in most cases. But still, the responsibility for childcare and often also for housework is mostly on her. And then I believe that it is a possible reason for lower fertility rate in Poland and generally speaking in post-socialist countries. But this is a bit of other story, and if someone is interested, I can speak about it, and I have slides prepared for it later after the main presentation. Okay. Again, the slides are stuck. Okay. So now I want to talk about this particular situation when the couples actually decided to share parental leave. And I will omit one couple who is absolutely exceptional, and they wanted to share the labor equally from the beginning, and they did an extremely hard job to do so. It is a very interesting case study, but I don't think it often happens in Poland, and I think it is a complete outlier. However, if someone is interested, my PhD thesis should be available in 1 year time, and I'm using this couple a lot. For now, I would focus on the other situations that I encountered, and the 3 couples, I would say, used the system. So the father used the system to his own advantage. And one of my female respondents says that he de facto used the system for his own purposes, to travel a bit, to do some self-development activities. When I came back to work, family friend became a nanny, and she took care of our child for about a year. Then there was a private nursery. So in this situation, the father did not want to become a primary carer for the beginning. Like, this was not his intention when he took parental leave. And in the second situation, it was even more obvious, because the male respondent says that from the beginning, the plan was that I would earn some extra money on parental leave because my wife works on a commission contract, and not much because she wants to be with our little one. So basically, the man decided to take the parental leave, get 80% of his previous income, and then he also started another part-time job. And by that, he also wanted to self-develop, so he entered a little bit different type of employment than before. And on top of that, the total income of a family increased, and the mother was still the main carer of the child for the whole time. What is important to notice, time from home, and it was rather obvious for me that in the end he actually did more housework and childcare work than he would without taking the parental leave. And then there is another situation when a mother earns significantly more, and when this occurred, I would say it was normal for parents to have a discussion and consider the man taking the leave. But usually something else had to happen. And for this particular couple, there was a pressure from the employer. And basically, the mother says that they called me every month asking if I would really come back to make sure that it would happen at the exact time. I think that's why I made the decision to come back to work so early. Usually are needed to undermine this natural division of labor in minds of the couple, natural division of labor. And then the discussion happens about the possibility of father taking the leave, but still it does not mean necessarily that they will decide to share the leave. Some additional factor is required. Okay, and then I would ask the question, when couples actually negotiate? Because from what I have said so far, it seems that everything is done that everything is done without any there are some situations when they do discuss, and the most often mentioned was by women initiating the discussion and saying that they have too much work to do. And it is both about the housework in general, childcare for couples living in villages and towns. So in the situations where a man really did not take care of children, then this was a reason to start negotiations. And those negotiations were like real quarrels, I would say. When then for most of the couples, some discussion about domestic labor, meaning housework happened, because women tend to do more of it, and at some point they decide to negotiate. And then something which I found interesting, but I still did not really dig into it, is that I gathered a lot of material about sick leaves, and there seems to be a lot of negotiating going on there. So it is like a norm is that women tend to take most of the sick leave, but the negotiations really happen. And about who can go to the sick leave in the particular moment of time. Okay, so here is a quote that my wife starts discussion more often. So she tells me what else must be done. She is the main force in organizing housework and childcare. And then I would like to say that there are three things that have to happen for the negotiations to happen. And one is that the choice has not to be natural or obvious. So it can't be like with the parental leaves, that there is nothing to discuss at all, and both partners agree that this is like from the beginning, we know what will happen. And then one person has to be upset and lead them. And this is usually the person initiating the discussion. And then something which may not be very obvious is that negotiations are acquired skill. And this was something that when I was asking at the end of my interviews directly about the negotiating aspect, many of my respondents said that at the beginning they were not discussing things, and they became more and more frustrated, and they couldn't really do that. And then with time, they developed some kind of strategy to do so. And those strategies sometimes included negotiation, like spoken form. The other forms of changing the existing division of labor, I mentioned before with the citations. So there was one quote when a woman changed systematically, like taught the husband to make sandwiches. So this story happened a lot, that without any negotiations, they tended to push a man towards doing more. But then the negotiations is something that they learned with time, and it was not natural thing. And it was also often they also mentioned that it was acquired skill on both sides, because men tended at the beginning not to engage with them into discussion. And then with time, it happened for most of my respondents that they find a strategy which worked for them. And they changed a little bit the division of labor, and it happened often before the second child was born. So with the upcoming decision to having a second child, there was discussion about what we can change in the division of labor to decide for another one. Okay, so yes, okay, so I have a double slide, and this was a missing quote here that I wanted to use. This first quote on the slide, I'm sorry, is the one I wanted to use to show that the situation when woman wants to negotiate but are not able to at the beginning. So it usually looked like I did everything for both of us. I worked, and then I was offended that I did work. Later I yelled, and he said he didn't know what was going on. We argued. Then we figured it would be fine somehow, after which it was not fine, and that's it. So I didn't say right away what bothered me. Then there were some confrontations. I tried to have some discussion on a regular basis. So this kind of situation happens for most of my couples, that at the beginning, the woman became more and more frustrated and didn't really engage into negotiations. Then she burst out, and this usually happened after the birth of the first child, and when she was really overburdened with all the housework and with staying at home with a child. And then there was no place for a real discussion because emotions took over, and also men tended to say that this was an like unreasonable emotional reaction. And then with time, the couples gathered to get to the situation that they can really talk about the problem, and the real discussion happens.